Hey friends, Ash here. Welcome back to Gents. Hope that you're doing well. If you're here, then that means you want to know what the top 30 best-selling, most popular men's fragrances are. And that's what I got for you. Come over here. Keep this between us, okay? This is the actual real deal ranking 30 through to number 1 based entirely off sales data. Not reading the tea leaves, like this is the actual info that the fragrance brands and the fragrance houses have themselves. Which means typically you would not be able to get this information, period. Essentially you have to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody to get the official documents. This is the whole thing. And we are going worldwide today, baby. We're not talking United States. I already did that, so if you haven't seen that video, check it out. I have the actual top 30 rankings of the US for men's fragrances for the entirety of 2024. Today, we're in Europe. So you'll be able to see how different the taste is between the US and Europe. It is pretty different. There are a lot of similarities, but you're gonna see also there are a lot of things that will just... Now, a couple of qualifiers that you need to know so that this makes sense. The way that sales data is calculated is based off of each individual SKU, each individual item, but they do it in kind of a weird way, so let me explain. If a fragrance has an eau de toilette, an eau de parfum, and a parfum, right? But the fragrance name stays the same. So just as an example, we'll say Aqua de Jo. There's Aqua de Jo eau de toilette, eau de parfum, and parfum. They would include all three of those as underneath the sales of just Aqua de Jo. But if you have a flanker, that's considered its own separate thing. So example, Aqua de Jo Absolu, that would have been just its own separate entry. Those sales would not be included with the original Aqua de Jo. Aqua de Jo Profundo has an eau de toilette and an eau de parfum and a parfum. So those would all be underneath Aqua de Jo Profundo. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's kind of confusing, but that's how they do it. Let's start number 30, best-selling fragrance in the entirety of Europe, Aqua de Jo Profundo. And I do have to tell you guys, this is for the entire first half of this year. So we're talking 2025 sales, January through end of June. So Aqua de Jo Profundo coming in at 30 at the very last one in the top 30, but it's actually up year over year by about 7 spots. And that probably goes back to what I was telling you just now about how, you know, eau de toilette, eau de parfum, all of that combined. Number 29 is where we can see Europe greatly differing from the US. Hugo Man is the number 29 best-selling fragrance for the entirety of Europe. Now, I do also have some country-specific rankings, which I'll share a little bit of that as we go on as well. Just a ton of information to get through. But one thing you will notice here, Hugo Boss is much, much, much more popular in Europe versus the US as far as their sales for fragrances go. And if Hugo Man coming in at 29th doesn't tell you that, I don't know what else will. Also, these sales are based on value, not volume, which makes this one even more interesting because Hugo Man is not a very expensive fragrance, but there it is. Oh, and something maybe even more interesting about Hugo Man, that ranking, 29th, is actually down year over year. That means it was selling even more in 2024. Number 28 is Explorer from Mont Blanc. Of course, everybody knows this one smells a little bit similar to Creed's Aventus, only much more affordable, super versatile, easy to wear, compliment puller, you know the drill. 27th is Uomo Born in Roma Intense by Valentino, which in the US, this is a much higher selling fragrance. It's up toward the top. Here, down toward the bottom, but still in the top 30, which means obviously super successful. But pointing out those differences between the US and Europe even more, while Born in Roma Intense made the top 30 down here, but still in there, the original Born in Roma did not. And in the United States, that one, 8th. And this one is actually up 20 spots year over year. So it was doing even worse the year before, but now I guess catching on a little more. The next fragrance, again, way different than the US, Eau Sauvage. Yeah, which this one fell a couple spots year over year, but Eau Sauvage Eau de Toilette, you will never see this in the top 30 in the US. Now, while this is an amazing fragrance, super classy, ultra classy, I feel like this is probably carryover from a lot of older gentlemen who are probably still wearing this and have been wearing it for years, decades, and they're still buying it, which is why it's still there in the top 30. Number 25 is a fragrance that dropped a lot year over year, about 12 spots, Phantom. by Paco Rabanne. Now, Phantom in the US actually fell completely out of the top 30 and fell even more than this one here. So that means, I know, another weird thing, more people in Europe right now are buying Phantom at retail than in the US. So this is one of those deals where somebody is like, ah, Europe, Eau Sauvage, much more refined, their noses, their palates, obviously. Followed up quickly by Phantom, and they're like, you ruined it, Paco Rabanne, God. Number 24 is Hero by Burberry. Now keep in mind, this is going to include eau de toilette and the eau de parfum and, you know, the parfum, but still in the top 30, definitely lower though than the US. So Hero more popular in the United States based off of these sales rankings than in Europe. That said, the fragrance, super easy to wear, nice, modern, masculine, woody fragrance. The next one, again, a fragrance that you will not see in the top 30 of the US, but it deserves it. This stuff is fantastic. But even though it is fantastic, seeing this in the top 30 bestsellers to me is like, because again, these numbers, these rankings, this is not just going and looking at bestseller lists and trying to figure out, well, that one's been a bestseller for a while, so it's probably up there. Which that'll give you like a decent idea, but it won't give you the full picture. It is Dior Homme Intense. Somehow, some way, Dior Homme Intense just absolutely crushing. Because when you smell this fragrance, yes, it's amazing, masterpiece, but you don't maybe necessarily think like, oh, that's gonna be a mass appealing success. And somehow, Dior Homme Intense is outselling Dior Homme 2020 and Dior Homme Sport. Number 22, another fragrance where when you see it, you'll just be like, what? Not that it's a fragrance that's unknown. Everybody knows this, like everybody knows this and has known it for decades. Just not what I would expect of as a, you know, huge moving fragrance that's selling more than this stuff over here. Cool Water. Cool Water is just outside the top 20 in Europe, which I almost wonder if part of this is, you know, the same thing that may be going on with Eau Sauvage. It's just been such a big fragrance for so long that people are still wearing it, you know, still buying it that have worn it for a long, long, long time. Also, it's classy, good for spring, summer, easy to wear, all things considered, and really cheap. So I guess that doesn't hurt either. And then at number 21 is Le Male Le Parfum, which this one also shot up the rankings in the US as well, year over year. And it's doing pretty much the same thing in Europe, actually. It has moved up a lot year over year. So this one has gotten more popular. Fall, wintertime staple at this point. A lot of people just absolutely love this stuff. And this one is ultra popular no matter where you are. We're in the top 20. It is another Dior. And it's another one that is not anywhere near the top 30 in the US. Fahrenheit. Straight up Fahrenheit. Yeah, not Fahrenheit Le Parfum, just the original, which I still think this stuff smells amazing. Like, this stuff is fantastic. A lot of people will kind of write this off. They'll be like, you know, it's old. And I mean, it is decades old at this point, but they'll say, you know, it smells too much like petrol, gasoline, it's unwearable. But to me, it actually just makes it interesting. You know, you smell this, that violet, the way it comes across mixing with leather. Oh, fantastic. And in Europe, people are still rocking it. So the next fragrance did not even chart last year in the US, but I feel like that'll change. I feel like when the numbers come in for 2025, it'll be there. And a reason for that is it didn't really get pushed heavily to like US retailers until this year, maybe like late last year, but mainly this year is when that's kicked off in a big way. It's a fragrance you could find this for years, but it was mainly discounters. And like I said, not as heavily pushed at retailers. It's stronger with you. And this one was actually up a couple spots year over year, so it's getting more popular in Europe, even though it's been out for a while. And I think that just speaks to the fragrance line in general, that it's getting this second wind, essentially, that has really kicked off here recently, and that carries over to Europe as well. Myself, Le Parfum is in the next spot. So with this one, you may think, well, it's Le Parfum. Shouldn't that count toward just like myself in general, because that's what some of these others are, right? No, because it's Le Parfum. Yeah. Eau de Parfum and Parfum are considered just different concentrations of the same thing, if that's the only thing that changes. Le Parfum is considered an entirely new entry. And this one was actually a little more popular in Europe than the US. In the US, this one debuted 24th. Obviously here it is 18th. So myself, Le Parfum, right there, just outside the top 15. Number 17, a fragrance that did not chart in the US at all, and this one actually stands pat. This is where it was year over year, so its popularity pretty much the exact same. The Scent by Hugo Boss. So the scent's getting loved somewhere, just maybe not as much in the United States, but Europe. It's a line that I really like. Some of the fragrances obviously more than others, but they have some really solid releases in this lineup, and in the US it flies completely under the radar. So this one is really interesting in that in the United States, if you have this, you have something from, yeah, a big designer brand, everybody knows Hugo Boss, but it flies under the radar. You're not really gonna smell this ever. So if you're wearing it, or one of the other fragrances in the Scent line, you've got something that smells really unique. If you're wearing this in Europe, you're wearing a top 20 most popular fragrance. And yes, I know that Europe is multiple countries, and every country has its own culture, its own stylings, and different fragrances are gonna be popular in different places. And like I said, we'll go over some of that after the top 30. Number 16, just outside the top 15, Le Male Elixir. And that one also moved up a little bit year over year, which shows that push that Jean-Paul Gaultier has had specifically with these two scents. Into the top 15, Allure Homme Sport by Chanel. Was not in the top 30 in the US. It's still obviously popular there, a lot of people wearing it, but much more popular in Europe. Super easy to wear, great basically year-round fragrance. Number 14, moving up a couple spots, YSL Y, and that is going to include the Eau de Parfum. This one much more popular in the US. YSL Y in the US is, what is it? 6th, I think it was. But here, 14th. So still a really good showing, still extremely popular, but for some reason, why much more popular in the United States, possibly due to the sweetness that it has, I'm not sure. And number 13 is actually the number 3 fragrance in the US, Eros. So possibly same kind of deal, right? Eros, really well known for that sweetness off the top, but it's down here a little bit lower in the list versus the United States. And then the next one, Sauvage Elixir. And each of these, Sauvage Elixir, Eros, and Y, slid just a tiny teensy bit year over year. So essentially their popularity is staying about the same. But once again, another one that's ever so slightly more popular in the US versus Europe, but still obviously extremely popular overall. And just outside the top 10, Code, Armani Code. Code at this point, total classic. I mean, this fragrance, everybody knows it. It seems like everybody owns it, both in the US and Europe. And you've got the Eau de Toilette, the Eau de Parfum, and the Parfum here. Each one giving something a little bit different, and each one contributing to the sales numbers. So that's the first 20, now on to the top 10. The things that jump out the most to me in terms of differences is Dior Homme Intense, Cool Water, Fahrenheit, Eau Sauvage, Hugo Man, stuff like that. That stuff will never sniff the top 30 in the US. You know, Hugo Boss The Scent. Did I say that already? I don't know. And I feel like, again, part of the reason these fragrances are in here, some of these, is, and again, this is no shot at these fragrances, they're fantastic, obviously, but I feel like a lot of it is just people who have worn them for so long and they continue to buy them, and that keeps those sales numbers up. Number 10, Stronger With You Intensely. Since it's a flanker, it's separate from the original Stronger With You, and this one just inside the top 10, actually moving up year over year. That one was previously around 15th or so, so moved up. Number 9, a fragrance that is way more popular in Europe, and it's probably going to be a surprise to you because, you know, some of these sweeter fragrances are down versus the US, but then this one is up, and it's definitely a sweet fragrance line. Invictus, 9th place. Now Invictus did come out with the Parfum edition, which definitely helped boost that up in the US and Europe as well. But yeah, outperforming versus the United States sales numbers. And so is this one, because it was not even in the top 30 in the US, but here, the top 10, Le Male, the original. And that's a great showing from that line, because you've got Le Parfum, Elixir, and the original, all 3 here. So you've got basically 10% of the top 30 coming just from this line. After that one, Myself by YSL, the original. In the US, that was a little bit higher, but obviously it's doing extremely well basically everywhere that fragrances are sold. I would say that Myself is the biggest fragrance launch or line launch of the past 5 years easy. I can't think of a single line over the past 5 years off the top of my head anyway that has hit the same way that Myself did. Basically came out and immediately shot up to top 10, top 5 best-selling in the world. It is massive. Number 6 is Terre d'Hermès Yes, Terre d'Hermes, which I'm so glad to see that getting love, because in the US, not in the top 30, and you know, no. But here, just outside the top 5, crushing it. And you know what? If they had come out with Terre d'Hermes Eau de Parfum, Terre d'Hermes Parfum, that would be in the top 5, I would bet you. Stay with me though, that's not the last big surprise here. Number 5 is Aqua de Jo, which is, yeah, it's Aqua de Jo. You knew this was gonna show up somewhere, and it's right here, 5th place. 4th place, 1 million, which 1 million also does really well in the US, not top 5 really well, but in Europe, man, people are wearing this out. And I guess in the battle of clubbing fragrances, at least on the continent of Europe, Eros has been defeated by 1 million, whereas in the US, it's swapped. 3rd place, which is another one that's just like, Boss Bottled. Boss Bottled is number 3 in Europe. Think about that for a second. Like, what? Obviously this stuff is mega successful. Like, nobody's ever gonna look at Boss Bottled and be like, oh, that's a failure. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying to see it in the top 3 still this many years later, man, staying power. Number 2, Bleu de Chanel. Yeah, so that is the same as in the US, and also number 1, Sauvage. Also the same as the US. But let's dig just ever so quickly into some of the different countries so we can see different things across those countries. For example, France, where Terre d'Hermes is number 3 as far as bestsellers go, and in France, Bleu de Chanel is number 1, Sauvage number 2. But that's not all. In France also, Eau Sauvage is a top 10 bestseller, so is La Nuit de l'Homme. Some other interesting fragrances that sell very well in France, Abbey Rouge by Guerlain is a top 25 bestseller. Azzaro Chrome is a top 15 bestseller. And somehow, some way, Diesel's Only the Brave is a top 30 bestseller. Go figure. In Germany, the number 1 best-selling fragrance, Boss Bottled. And the number 5 best-selling fragrance, Cool Water. The original Joop Homme fragrance in Germany to this day is still just outside the top 10, which I love you psychopaths out there wearing Joop in Germany. That's fantastic. Wear it out. Just don't come near me wearing that stuff, please, please, please. And in Germany, both Luna Rossa Black and Eros Energy are top 30 bestsellers, as well as Jill Sanders' Sun, randomly. In the UK, the top 3, Sauvage, Bleu de Chanel, 1 million. And also in the UK, Aventus, a top 10 best-selling fragrance. But it's not a top 30 in Germany or France. And they must love Versace in the UK because both the Dreamer and Dylan Blue are top 30 bestsellers there. In Spain, it is Sauvage, Boss Bottled, and then Aqua de Jo in your top 3. Somehow Calvin Klein Eternity, also a bestseller there, along with 212 by Carolina Herrera, which makes sense. And we can't leave out Italy, which has Sauvage, Bleu de Chanel, and Aqua de Jo in that order. Eros doing extremely well there, also top 10 bestseller. And Dolce & Gabbana doing quite well in Italy, which is probably not a big surprise, with K and Light Blue doing much better there than the other countries. And Gucci Guilty as well, doing better in Italy than the other countries. So Italians wearing Italian stuff. All right guys, there it is. If you want to know what people are wearing in Europe, now you know. A lot of things stay the same versus the US, a lot of things are drastically different. You see a lot more old school stuff in the top 30 of Europe with mixed in new things. You know, you've got a bunch of different stuff going on here. I want to thank you guys for hanging with me here until the end. Stay safe out there, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you tomorrow with another fragrance video. See you guys.